Good evening, this is N7GES, and welcome to the NCARC TechNet. My name is Kevin. I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado. We meet here every Monday evening to discuss technical, amateur radio-related subjects, sometimes not always tech subjects, but amateur-related operational subjects, certainly. We are happy to entertain questions and ideas. Before we begin, I'll just mention that we have a YouTube page where our programs are being streamed and archived. You can leave comments there, I'm sure. The easiest way to reach me directly would be probably Elmers at NCARC.net. Do we have any emergency or priority traffic before we start? We will certainly accept any emergency traffic anytime during the net. Just please say break and give your call sign, and we'll stop the net and take care of helping you out as much as is necessary. We do have a few reminders. Of course, in case we go, the repeater goes down, we'll switch over to the 145-115 machine. We're welcoming opinions and ideas. They are personal opinions and ideas only. They're not reflective of the club or the repeater organizers or anything of that nature. And we ask that everybody's opinions and ideas be respected. Tonight, I don't think we have a contingent topic. I'm a little tired today again, so forgive me for having a little trouble with words. But an interesting one, and something that I think we can all learn from in very practical terms, probably mostly especially for UHF and VHF, but probably for others as well. Let me first start and take some check-ins to see who is around and listening, and who I might be able to pick on, perhaps. But not if you're not willing, certainly. Who's listening this evening that would like to participate? N7GES.
Good evening, Kevin. N0EMP, Greg, Fort Collins.
This is November 0, November Yankee, Bart Evans. Good evening.
KE0OYR, Joe in Johnstown.
Kilo 0 Alpha Bravo Kilo Alec LaSalle.
W3 Hotel Tango Lima, Rich and Elizabeth.
This is W7KRU, Drake, Colorado. Previously K7KRU. I did get my vanity sign corrected and changed to what I wanted, in case anybody's heard all that. So, good evening.
This is KE0, Oscar X-Ray Victor Scott, Fort Collins.
Wow, got quite a group here, so let me stop and welcome KE0OXV, W7KRU, and congratulations on the new call sign. Is it W3 HTL. Rich, I know I've had trouble with your call before, but I missed the beginning of it there. Come again?
Yes, sir. Whiskey 3, Hotel Tango Lima, Rich.
Thank you, Rich, in Elizabeth. K0ABK. And Alec, good evening. Once again, you've got to get a little more into your microphone. Your audio is just about to vanish there. And KE0OYO, good evening. I'm sorry, OYR. Okay, I maybe need to check on that. Did I copy that one right, Joe?
That's correct. KE0OYR.
Okay, thank you very much. And N0NYY and N0EMP. Thanks all very much. Glad to have so many folks already in here. Anybody else before we start on our topic here?
This is Whiskey 0 Alpha Sierra Papa, Terry in Berthoud.
This is November 0 Bravo November Kilo, Rick, Fort Collins.
All right. We had a double. Welcome to W0ASP. And I picked up N0BNK. Good evening, Rick. And there was another in there that I did not catch. Come again, please.
Good evening, Kevin. That was me, Troublemaker. Kilo Delta 0, Whiskey Bravo Charlie, Pete, Fort Collins.
Okay, very good, Pete. Glad to have you. Anybody else before we continue?
Kilo Echo 0, Papa Oscar Whiskey, Nick, operating mobile.
Okay, good evening, Rick. KE0POW. Where are you at, Rick? You said, I know you said you're mobile. Where are you at?
I am in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay, very good. And I recognize you're coming from the 7.5 repeater. Very good, thank you. To our video stream folks, if you're interested in and you're hooked up with Echolink, you can receive us there as well, or participate there as well. The repeater would be W0UPS-R on Echolink. So feel free to dial in there if you would like, and I'll pause and take check-ins a little later perhaps, and we'll see who we have from there as well. With that in mind, we all need to take a little break in between transmissions to make sure that anybody coming in from Echolink or elsewhere has time to get in too. Anybody else before we continue?
Whiskey 2, Mike, India, Charlie, Mark in Loveland.
Well, good evening, Mark, W2MIC. Glad to have you along, and thank you for joining us. I heard a click, but nothing else from the other repeaters. Or somebody else wanting to check in? Okay, well then we'll begin, I think, at this point with our topic and continue from there. It was suggested that we chat about what does weather do to propagation. And we talk a lot about space weather conditions, but we don't always talk about our weather that affects our direct atmosphere. And some of us are very aware of these things already, and some of us may not be. So I thought it might be good to open up the question here for those folks who would like to enlighten us, to fill us in more. We had a very interesting simplex net Thursday evening, where we had a very rainy evening, and we had some very unusual effects. Not necessarily signal loss. In some cases it was lower signal, but in some cases it was fairly strong signal, but very distorted signal. Very unusual for those of us that play simplex on Thursday evenings. So let me open it up. Let me maybe first have some folks make some comments, some of which were brought to us on our TechNet the other night, or on our simplex net the other night. Bart, may I pick on you first?
Oh, man, why is it always me? No, I'm kidding. Of course you may. The one item that I knew ahead of time was that you have very wet ground, and in Colorado the ground here is not typically a very good RF reflector because of the nature of the soil until you get it wet. Then it's a really good reflector, so you end up with multipath. And I also knew that moisture can have an adverse effect on your antenna. It adds capacitance, it changes inductance, things like that happen. And the third item, which was new to me the other night, and I don't remember if it was Greg that mentioned, I can't remember who mentioned it, but was that the raindrops are actually charged particles. And when they repeatedly strike your antenna, it actually creates additional noise, brings the noise floor up to your own receiver. So those three items, and we really saw a good demonstration of that the other evening on the simplex net. And it was fun. It was educational. It's a little bit annoying because all the people that you normally have an excellent copy to start getting kind of weak. And all the people that you have trouble hearing before are done. Nothing comes through. N0 on my way back to net.
Okay, thank you. Terry, may I pick on you next, perhaps? Anything to add to this? The other question I would ask is, what does this as well? What sorts of effects will this have on HF as well as VHF and UHF?
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, I can go. Well, in general, the HF frequencies are less affected by rain in practice. I'm not 100% sure of the reason. One of them may be those are affected, I don't think Bart did mention, which is the actual presence of water in the atmosphere changes its index of refraction and causes scattering and absorption. So the signal's not going to be going necessarily in a straight line, and you're going to get more than R squared loss, even if all the other effects weren't there. So that's part of it, and I'm pretty sure on HF that those absorption factors are lower. In fact, as you go higher in frequencies into the gigahertz band, they become very substantial. You have to figure in rain attenuation in your signal margins substantially, especially above gigahertz. Yeah, I think the other one that Bart did mention is that the rain can be charged, can have charged particles to it when it hits your antenna. Each little raindrop will drop a little bit of static into your antenna, raising your noise floor. W0ASP.
Just a comment, please.
Certainly. Good evening, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, not only can rain produce static as it charges the antenna, we also have snow static and sand static or dust static. They all carry charges. If they get heavy, they can produce the same sort of phenomena that rain static can. W0LEV, back to cooking.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Other comments from anybody at this point in time or questions?
BNK.
We had a double. I heard BNK. Go ahead.
Well, we had a good example of that yesterday evening during our snow/rainstorm. Terry and I were using the Boulder 220 repeater, but he had a good, strong signal the whole time. But as time went along, I increased the power because it was getting scratchy, my signal to him, and finally it was just I was not able to use the repeater. So Mike DUS and I were talking just a little while ago, and this was working fine. So that moisture was wiping me out pretty much on 220. N0 BNK.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions for us at this point? We got several people, I think, that could answer additional questions about this. Anybody got questions?
MIC.
Good evening, MIC. Go ahead.
I was the double underneath Rick. Oh, I have comments about HF and rain and snow. Back during the peaks of previous solar cycles, my happy times for talking over the pole to Eastern Europe and Russian stations, including Vladivostok, was to go after a good solid rain followed by snow. These are the times you do not want to be out on the road driving. But once the snow would clear, I got exceptional transmission and reception going over the pole to those stations. During regular times, like, summer, winter, etc., not wet, frozen ground with a snow cover, I had a lot of trouble reaching those same stations. So I really look forward to a good solid winter rain and snow for talking HF over the Arctic pole.
Very interesting. Thank you for that observation. And that was rain followed by snow. So you had the moisture in the air and the ground cover as well then. Is that right, Mark?
All correct. Snow on the ground was much better than no snow on the ground, but rain, freezing, followed by snow was best of all.
ASP with a question?
Question, I think, was that Terry?
Yeah, it was. A question for Mark. Mark, were you using vertically polarized antennas by chance?
Negative. I was using a horizontally polarized dipole at about 40, that's 40 feet.
And do you think some of this effect was a reduction in atmospheric noise or an increase in signal?
Both. I could hear stations that I had previously talked to with great difficulty, and at least on my ICOM 706, I was showing 2 or even 3 S units better. Who knows what an S unit on an ICOM radio is in terms of dB. And the noise and interference changed character from a crackle to a hiss.
Yeah, that could be a change in the atmospheric electricity, and that does happen when you remove after a storm. You'll have less atmospheric noise on the HF bands.
Terry, run that by me again. What would that be due to again?
Well, Kevin, the primary cause of atmospheric noise on HF is the cacophony of all lightning strikes around the world getting into your antenna as one big hiss. And the local ones, of course, give you more contribution to that than the further away ones. And when a storm goes through, and even snowstorms, last night we had thunder snow, but even a regular snowstorm will have a lot of atmospheric electricity associated with it, and it will carry that electricity away from your location.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All this is new to me, so I'm glad to get that down here. Appreciate that. Okay, other comments. EMP, are you at a point where do you have anything you'd like to add to us here?
Sure, Kevin. I got a couple comments. One is I primarily run horizontal wire antennas that are relatively close to the ground as far as wavelength is concerned. They're less than a quarter wave above ground. And it's helpful to me when the ground is nice and wet. So either during or after a rainstorm, when the ground is nice and wet, it makes a better reflector. The other thing I noticed last summer, I was monitoring 6-meter sideband just to see if there would be an opening. And I was using a vertical antenna outdoors that was kind of pointed at the top. It didn't have a ball on the end, because I had cut a vertical whip down to 6 meters, so it was just a pointy end. And as a thunderstorm was approaching, but it wasn't here yet, but it was in the neighborhood, the atmosphere became positively charged to quite an extent, so that electrons were flowing up my coax and off the point of that antenna to create a corona, and I could hear a real loud hiss. And when a distant lightning strike would occur, it would discharge that charge, and the hiss would stop, and then it would start building and getting louder and louder and louder until another lightning discharge would neutralize it, until a storm got close enough and I unhooked everything and turned it off, and 0 EMP.
Okay, this is interesting. Are you talking the hiss that you are hearing? Was that in the radio or physically from the antenna from on the outside?
No, it was in the audio, and if I turned it on to AM, it was even louder, but even on sideband I could hear it. It's called corona noise, and that's often why you have a ball on the end of a vertical antenna to try to mitigate that.
W0LEV again.
Go ahead, LEV.
Yeah, in the natural world, I think it's called St. Elmo's fire, and I've heard this a number of times on the 147-195 repeater out of Loveland, Namaka Hill. A nice hot cloud gets near over that repeater, and you will actually hear a tone as the charge difference increases. The frequency of the tone will increase. Kind of neat, actually. You'll hear it on 2 meters. I don't know if I've ever heard it on the 450 repeaters, but for some reason, Namaka Hill seems to attract the hot clouds, and you'll hear a and yeah, Greg is right. If you get a lightning strike within reasonable distance, it just instantly stops because the atmosphere is discharged. W0LEV, once again, going back to cooking.
Okay, thank you, Dave. This is N7GES, and this is the TechNet. It's getting so interesting that I'm forgetting to identify, so thank you. Sorry to anybody that's watching there. Very interesting stuff, and I don't know that I've experienced a lot of this, so this is kind of making me very, very curious. Okay, other questions specifically at this point, and then I'll call again for other comments. Okay. I'm certainly glad we're answering all the questions. Any additional comments? We've been talking HF here for the last several minutes. We started out talking VHF and UHF. Well, the last comment was UHF oriented as well. Any additional comments from anybody on any of these effects?
November 0 Whiskey India Quebec. And I haven't been listening long enough to have much to say, so back to Ned.
Well, thank you for checking in anyway, Carrie. I'm glad to have you. I'm writing you down here on the queue, and appreciate you being there. Any other comments? What we're discussing is weather, and not space weather so much, but our local environmental weather and how it affects various forms of radio propagation and reception and transmission. So that's the topic, and we've covered several effects of on VHF and UHF and HF at this time. So once again, I'll open it up. Any additional comments from anybody?
Yeah, one more, please, from cooking, W0LEV.
Sure, go. You might as well just take the radio in one hand and the spatula in the other, Dave, so you can keep at it.
Yeah, well, this is what the Lee Hill link allows me to do. I can get to the repeater through Lee Hill from the kitchen. Comment about start charge. If you've had a good lightning storm in the area, it's highly likely the coax from the antenna to where it hopefully is disconnected from the radio becomes a charged cylindrical capacitor. It's always a good idea when you disconnect antennas, not just to disconnect them, but to put a shorting connector on it, or a 50 ohm, or whatever you want, to discharge any charge that may reside on the coax. I could go into it further, but I won't. If you don't put something to discharge the coax, at least grab the connector and hold your finger between the braid and the center conductor. You may or may not get a little shock, but it's better than destroying a radio. W0LEV.
Yes, and I have heard that not only might it be a little shock, but it might knock you down too. So, yes, do take that as a serious warning, and absolutely. All right. So we've and this of course leads into lightning protection, which I don't necessarily want to go into tonight, but we certainly will probably cover that yet again at another time for reminders, because that's always a good idea. But we all, of course, already know that lightning is a dangerous thing, and we have to handle it very, very carefully when we're using big antennas that are up there just waiting to pick it up. So we'll cover that more on another net so that we don't get too distracted. So let's talk about repeaters for a moment. We've already heard a little bit about trouble getting into a repeater from during a storm then. So we know that's a reality. Are there, from any of you folks that would like to advise, what sorts of things can we do? We have power we can raise, we have better antennas maybe we can put up, but perhaps there are certain antennas that would be better than others. Are there other techniques we can use when we are trying to get to somebody else on, say, VHF or UHF in a moisture or perhaps somewhat electrically charged atmospheric situation?
NYY.
NYY, go.
I am an avid fan of the good old-fashioned Yagi beam, or Yagi Uda beam. 6 dB doubles your powers twice. I think you can get that with 6 or 7 elements pretty easily. I may be slightly off on my numbers, but the nice thing is that you can bring a lot of the energy that you're sending all around in 360 down to bear in a much narrower main lobe. So they're easy to build. They're not terribly expensive, and you can rotate them with a little old-fashioned TV antenna rotator, or even manually if you want to. If you have trouble getting into a repeater in a storm, in my opinion, a beam is an ideal way to go. If you don't have a rotator, point it at the repeater or your best friend and leave it there. And 0NYY back to net.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Nobody else with any particular tips on any particular type of antenna that might function better? Just raising the power, is that our best bet there when we're trying to get communicate locally, either with a repeater or simplex? Okay, so we have to get our power up and perhaps get a beam if we really are having difficulty. What about mobile situations? Any other advice anybody can offer in that situation? And that comes certainly up. That question comes up with Skywarn in the summertime. Okay, again, that either, as long as people are still listening, that leads me to believe that just as much power as you can and a good antenna. So far, nobody's correcting me on that. So we'll go with that until any other ideas happen to come up. The fact of the matter is, our energy is being reflected and de-energized, and you have to, you definitely will not be able to communicate as the same in a storm with moisture or electrically charged situation there. Okay, any other aspects of this that anybody would like to bring up here?
DNK.
2CO.
We had two people. BNK, if I may come back to you, I just want to get to our news station here first. W2CO, good afternoon, evening.
Good afternoon, Kevin and the group. This is Tom, W2CO, down in Longmont. Yeah, I've been listening on and off, and the one person that said the Yagi beam That's probably your best bet. But there is one step better than that, and that's the cubical quad. Both HF and VHF, UHF, it has both horizontal and vertical components, and it has buku gain. As far as HF goes, a 2-element quad is generally equal to a 3-element beam, and so on. I don't quite know how that factors in at VHF and UHF, but I do know that they also work on VHF and UHF very well because they have both horizontal and vertical components. Anyway, on HF, that really makes a big difference. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents. W2CO.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom, and thanks for joining in. Any comments along with that, and then I will come back to you, Rick. Okay, Rick, what you got?
Well, in reference to mobile, I would say if you're having a hard time, let's say you have your antenna mounted on one side of the vehicle. So you're having trouble going down the road. So you need to find a place where you can turn where the most metal is pointed in the direction that you want to communicate with. That does help. I was trying to talk to somebody in Loveland one time from Bellevue. It was 11 meters. And with a whip on my truck, but I was turned with the antenna on the most metal was away from there. It was headed north. So I turned the truck around, and then the signal was we could talk to each other. So it does make a difference. N0BNK.
I think that was DDZ. Good evening. Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. I have a couple of things. First, I had a comment from Sacramento, California that says, I have found after a rainstorm that reception goes up as long as there's still overcast. I also wanted to ask the question as the heavy or the storm season is approaching and we are looking at Skywarn, what is the minimum requirement that we want for power in our mobile vehicles for Skywarn spotting?
Wow. First of all, thank you to Sacramento listener for joining us, and really glad you went ahead and took the initiative. Thanks, Dave, for passing that along. Would anybody like to address that question?
MIC.
MIC, and let me just restate, I believe what I heard was minimum requirements for power for Skywarn operations. Go ahead, Mark.
W2 MIC. I can only answer indirectly from conversations with the former W0MBH and now WB0MH, Mike Hickerson, who was the Skywarn guru for years. He recommended flatly to me 50 watts, that's 50 watts, minimum VHF and UHF.
NYY.
NYY, go.
If you look at the grand scheme of things, first, I concur with Mark. I have been told 50 watts is a really good number to go with. A high-gain antenna is a really good thing to have. Here's the situation if you kind of look at the big picture. If you're in Fort Collins, chances are you can get into the repeater with a lot less than that. in most cases. If you come out to Greeley, you're going to have a little more trouble getting into the repeater in a bad situation. Pardon me. If you head out to points east of here, Kersey, where much of the flooding and a lot of bad things happen in terms of weather, you had better have 50 watts and you had better have a gain antenna, or net control and other people are going to spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what you're saying, what you're doing. It's usually the worst case scenario. You're probably in trouble or possibly in trouble, and these people would really like to help you and talk to you, but they can't because you're not well enough equipped. Think about your gear before you head far from the repeater. It really, really matters. I have been there. I live in Greeley. I go east a lot. Your 20-watt rig and your, Unity antenna, it's just not going to work. And you're jeopardizing yourself. You're jeopardizing other people. You're complicating things for the net, which is already a fairly high-stress situation anyway. Think about it. Plan it out. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying don't exceed your capabilities. And 0NYY. Sorry about the soapbox.
Nope, I think that's perfectly acceptable, and it makes good sense. And for the station in Sacramento, let me just mention, keep your topography in mind and where you've got repeaters and how hard are those to reach and what kind of propagation do you normally get from them, and then complicate that with weather situations. So what your requirements there might be a bit different because you might either have easier or less easy time getting to a repeater than we have as well. So certainly take that into consideration. Anything else? Other comments?
MIC.
MIC, go.
What WB0MH recommended to me, and I ended up getting, just to give people a baseline, is a Kenwood TMV71A, which is a 50 watts dual-sided, meaning two VFOs, VHF and UHF radio, and a Comet Super Gainer 7900, that's Sierra Golf 7900, which is about 7 dB of gain on UHF.
Okay, very good. And 7 GES with the TechNet. Any questions or additional comments?
ASP?
ASP, go.
Sorry, Kevin, I didn't get a chance to do any scholarly research on this topic of rain effects on UHF and VHF. But a little bit I was able to do in the last few minutes. I came up with a National Bureau of Standards technical note called Transmission Loss Predictions for Tropospheric Communication Circuits. And it comes from the National Bureau of Standards out of Boulder. The publication date is 1965. It does have a few equations in it, but it also has a few charts. And it's probably not above your a good ham to read through this and get a better understanding of how much loss we might expect under certain different rainfall conditions. W0ASP, back to net.
Okay. Can you give us some info as to how you found that or where you got it from?
It is a scan online. It comes from, let's see if I can get the source here. Let me grab a nickel, hold on.
Suggestion. Stand by for just a moment. Go ahead, Terry.
I don't have the link at the moment, but the title I gave will show up in a Google search. Oh, yeah, here it is. A website called CEPT, Charlie Echo Papa Tango.org. And and Transmission Loss Predictions for Tropospheric Communication is the title.
Okay. LEV, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I too have seen that, and I'd suggest you might want to post that on the NCRC website, because it comes up quite often. W0LEV.
That was my exact point on trying to get a hold of that there, so thank you. Dave, I bet you can probably come up with that easily enough for a link, and maybe you could just post that to Mark or Joe. Probably, I'm not Mark, Darren or Joe, to post on our website. Unless you have that access, I don't know that I don't have that at this point.
I'll definitely find it and throw it on the YouTube page. W0.
Cool. You might just email it to me too. I could Google for it, I guess, but I'm busy enough. I'm liable to forget it. If you have it handy and you just email it to me, then I can get it up for NCARC as well. Thank you very much, folks. Wow, what a good bit of info to have available. So yeah, do go out and Google that, and that was a long title. Does anybody need a repeat on that entire title? Okay. You can always go back and get the YouTube feed and grab it there, and Dave will probably have it up on the YouTube page shortly as well. So, very good. This is N7GES in the TechNet discussing weather and how it affects our propagation, and more than just space weather, because there's a lot of other things that are perhaps more physically, I guess you'd say, tangible to us, that can have quite a profound effect, as we're discovering here this evening. Any additional comments or questions for anybody here? Well, I don't want to leave anybody out if we have any additional, but I think we covered a lot of material in the short time we've been on the air. So let me just open it up to say, does anybody have any other topic questions at this point in time? Perhaps not related to this subject. Well, I'd like to think that we're just doing a darn good job of covering subjects, because we're getting no questions, but I know better than that. I do think of questions as you go along, and I have thought that we probably would have an open forum again at some point, but I've had so many people ask for topics, and so I wanted to keep that going for a while here. Perhaps I could get some feedback on whether you'd like to have an open topic evening, or shall we just keep going on these topics that we choose for the net. I kind of think I know where the answer will go, but I do want to have the ability to answer user questions as well. So I don't know whether we want to devote a week to that, or answer questions as they come up from week to week, rather than devote a whole evening to a totally open forum. Anybody have any particular thoughts? Like I say, I think I have a suspicion which way this will go, but any at least brief input on that I would appreciate.
NYY.
NYY, go.
It seems to me that our questions seem to have in the past been pretty popular. Haven't heard too many of the open ones tonight, but having the directed topic is good, but I know that even if we have a topic, sometimes the questions go off on a tangent, a good, healthy, productive, informative tangent. And that's a good thing, too. I think it kind of sort of leads itself, but it just feels like it has a good, it's always, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble talking tonight. It never hurts to have a good starting point, but especially with all the new hams lately, it's important to be able to go off and to get their questions answered. That is probably more helpful and more inviting to them than a specific topic, but like I said, it's always good to have a place to start.
W0ASP with a comment.
ASP, go.
Kevin, I don't know if I heard you call for general topics or anything, or asking anyone if anybody had any specific questions that we could answer on the TechNet. They used to be, when Joe had it, he'd start with that, and then if nobody had any, he'd go into the selected topic. But I think if someone has a question they need answered, that's the most important thing, is to get that answered. W0ASP.
Okay. That's a good point, and I don't remember. I may not have done that the last several weeks, and that may actually be a very good idea to at least put some time toward covering any burning questions somebody might have. So thank you for that. We'll try to make sure I schedule that in one way or the other there. Other comments?
Yeah, LEV.
LEV.
Yeah, supper's about done, so this will probably be my last. Number one, Bart, good soapbox. Number two, subject to lightning. We beat that to a black death last year. And I think if we do lightning, it's just once. And don't repeat and repeat and repeat like we did last year, because the same questions, same subjects were covered. I suppose we have to, because this last one was thunder snow with lots of lightning, at least out here. But that's one, like I said, we beat to a black death last year. W0LEV.
I think one of the things we might want to do with lightning is we had several very good bits of information in the form of literature that came out of our previous nets, and if those are still up on the NCARC website, maybe we can get those and kind of move them back toward the top of the list of things, and maybe even post them with this YouTube video as well, because there are already several people who have put together documents. One for very the absolute ultimate in lightning protection, I guess, would come from the Motorola folks, who of course are setting up for emergency services in a very professional manner. Some of that may perhaps go beyond what a lot of us as amateurs can handle, but there is that publication which was brought to our attention last year and the year before perhaps. And there's another one from the folks that make the lightning protectors. and my mind is going blank. But they also have a document. Polyphaser lightning protectors, the folks that make those also have a document about lightning protection as well. Would anybody else like to perhaps just come up with some quick resources that we can note here without necessarily beating the subject to death this evening again, to get people started in what to read, to study up on this if this happens to be your first time?
Yeah, there are a plethora of good resources online from an intelligent search phrase. Stick with those from the professional people, not so much the amateurs, although there are some good ones out there. I'd also recommend the book in that respect, Bonding and Grounding by ARRL. They finally came clean on years of bad practice. I was down at HRO Saturday. I had to come home with the book just because it's a wonderful, wonderful reference. That one, anybody considering lightning remediation, I would strongly recommend. W0LED.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Anything else to add to that bit of collection there? Okay, I think I could safely, this is N7GES with the TechNet, so I think we'll still be happy to entertain questions. But do realize that there's great info out there to look up. You will find some contradictions both on these previous nets that we have recorded in audio form on the NCARC website and other places. So, you know, there's different beliefs about what may or may not work, but of course the proof is only in the pudding. Did you get struck or not? And nothing is safe from a direct lightning strike. So there you go. You know, at least none of our home stations are guaranteed, and probably nothing is guaranteed. So there are controversial issues, but do some looking and see what makes see what you find, and then come back and ask questions, and we'll I think be more than happy to try to clarify points or help people make sense of things if they have questions on that. So do bring your questions and come back with those. Other comments?
NYY.
NYY.
If our modern technology will catch up and build us big enough rectifiers, that lightning could actually be useful.
Yeah, don't we all wish? Oh my! And would we ever start saving it? I wonder if we could ever deplete it and be another natural resource that we're throwing away wrongly. Well, I don't think we're going to have to worry about it for a while, but one never knows. Anyway, it's a good thought. Yeah, and something that I know people have been thinking about for many, many, many years. Hopefully it'll happen someday. So to continue then, what I was going to propose for next week, as we're getting close to summer, and we have lots of opportunities to participate in providing communications for various functions, especially things like races of various types. And we're always getting calls from various people who are helping to provide communications for various functions, that they need operators. Maybe I think it might be a good idea for us to briefly discuss what is involved in helping with communications for a field event? We're not talking field day. We're talking a field event, a race, a special event type situation where communications are needed, or an emergency situation. What is actually needed when somebody calls and wants people to help out? What types of things are they liable to ask for? What sorts of skills do we already have to have, and what sorts of skills can we expect to go ahead and learn on the way? Do we have to know all the answers before we get there? That sort of thing. Any objections to a topic like that for next week?
I don't, but I think it's a good idea, but I think Bart should once again get on the soapbox and pontificate on what he did that he labeled soapbox. W0LEV, at this time I'm clear.
I tell you, Dave, you just got to take the fork in one hand and the radio in the other and enjoy that dinner. We thank you for your contributions there. Well, anyway, we had some of that this evening with the discussion of things for Skywarn. But I think there's additional things that folks could tell us that are involved in running communications for some of these types of events. So hopefully I can get some of these folks to come on next week and discuss that with us to give those of us that are new or those of us who have done it before some reminder ideas of what's involved. What is it that we're liable to have to do? What sorts of equipment? What sorts of things we're going to be looking for? What sorts of functions can we do? What sorts of functions is it illegal for us to do as we're providing these communications? So if that seems reasonable, I will see about putting that together with some folks that can contribute to that, and we'll proceed with that topic next week, and of course with any other questions that anybody may come up with in the meantime. All right, I thank everybody for participating. We've only run about an hour, but it's been a very packed hour, and I hope everybody else has found this as valuable. I've been taking notes the whole time during NET here, and the last several weeks that I've been running it, and I probably got more valuable information than I ever have when I'm just sitting back listening. So as a tip for you, you might want to sit and take some notes as you listen, because sometimes it's easier when you've got it right there in front of you and you don't even have to run out and try to find out what it was you heard or where. So just a tip for you there as well as you listen to the net that may make it more valuable. However, we will try to make it as easy as possible by posting links and having these videos available for you to go back and listen to as well. So do feel free to make those to make use of those. So thank you again for participating. Don't forget to ask us questions both about email questions for the net or email questions just to the for the NCARC Elmer program. If you perhaps need somebody to reach out to you directly for assistance on some subject, that again is Elmers at NCARC.net. That's Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club, NCARC.net. Thank you very much again, 73s, and have a great evening, and we'll talk to you next week. This is N7GES, now clear and returning the repeater to normal use.
for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.